This is the movement at its zenith. Thousands of people are surging across a Galilean hillside, energized by the miraculous feeding they witnessed yesterday. For the first time, it looks like Jesus of Nazareth has the momentum to change everything. But then Jesus makes a statement that halts that momentum. He moves past the miracles and begins speaking about the necessity of consuming his flesh and drinking his blood. It is graphic, disturbing, and intentionally jarring. When the crowd begins to grumble, he doesn't walk it back. He doesn't offer a softer metaphor or clarify that he's speaking poetically. Instead, he doubles down, asking how they will react when he ascends to where he was before. He is watching his base of support evaporate in real time and doing absolutely nothing to stop the crowd from leaving. He has prioritized the purity of his message over the size of his following, even if it means standing alone. The crowd calls this a skleros logos, a hard saying. A hard saying isn't a puzzle that more information can fix. It's a demand that hits our assumptions and preferences head on. We often treat difficult teachings as intellectual riddles, where our logic just bounces off without ever engaging the truth. But Jesus is describing a barrier of the will. The teaching acts as a trap to those who want him on their terms, and the only way through is the heavy requirement of personal surrender. The response is a mass exodus. The original text says they turned back to the things behind. These aren't people simply wandering off. They are making a deliberate, permanent decision to return to their old lives and leave Jesus behind. This skleros logos functions as a deliberate filtration system. It creates a crisis that violently separates people who are consuming a religious product from those who are actually following a person. As the crowds disappear over the horizon, a heavy silence settles over the shoreline. Jesus is left standing with just the 12, the movement reduced from thousands to a handful. In this moment, Jesus exhibits a startling lack of desperation. He turns to his closest friends and asks, "Do you also want to go away?" He is handing them the door, giving them total freedom to walk away. He refuses to use any of the traditional tools of retention. He doesn't mention their past sacrifices, the time they've already invested, or the social embarrassment of quitting. He leaves them entirely uncoerced. Jesus is looking for a specific kind of following, one based on a genuine recognition of his unique value. He has no interest in disciples who only stay because they feel trapped by guilt or social pressure. In 1827, the American evangelist Walter Scott faced a similar crisis. His movement was exploding until he began preaching a specific biblical view of baptism that offended his peers. Suddenly, the crowds thinned and the opposition intensified. Scott had to decide whether to soften his message to keep the unity. He eventually concluded that his only job was to be accurate to the text, not to manage the size of the audience. He was responsible for the words, not the results. It's a reminder that the gospel has always been a poor candidate for focus groups. When truth is culturally unpopular, the reflex is to walk away, a reality that hasn't changed in 2,000 years. Peter's response to Jesus is the definitive blueprint for Christian faith. Notice that he doesn't claim to have solved the theological puzzle of the bread of life. He doesn't say, "I finally understand." He says, "We have believed and have come to know." Instructive. This is the biblical framework for how we actually learn about God. The massive foundation is belief and trust. It's only from that base that the tiers of deepening knowledge can be built. You trust the person before you fully grasp the propositions. Modern secular thought tries to flip this. We attempt to balance a massive demand for total comprehension on a tiny point of commitment. When we demand to have every mystery resolved before we step forward, the entire structure becomes unstable. Demanding total intellectual clarity as a prerequisite for following doesn't lead to truth. It just keeps you permanently outside the only process that produces it. Just moments after Peter's beautiful confession, the atmosphere shifts again. Jesus looks at the 12, the inner circle that stayed, and says that even among them, one is a devil. He uses the term diabolos. He is describing an active adversary who isn't attacking from the outside, but is operating from the very heart of the movement. He's talking about Judas. Judas had the same proximity to the miracles, heard the same teachings, and shared the same meals as Peter. Externally, he looked like a committed insider, while internally, his reality was the exact opposite. It's a warning that religious association is not the same thing as faith. You can be in the room, part of the mission, and recognized by the community while remaining a complete stranger. Proximity is a powerful illusion. At some point, you will face your own hard saying. You'll encounter a teaching of Jesus that costs you socially, professionally, or personally, something that feels impossible to accept. You'll feel the pressure as you watch your own circles, your friends or your family, slowly drift away when the cost of belief becomes too high. You'll be left standing on that same shoreline. That's when Peter's question becomes the only one that matters. To whom shall we go? This is a rational assessment. Peter has looked at the alternatives and realized that if he walks away from Jesus, he is walking into a world where the light has been turned off. Authentic faith is looking at the thinning crowd, recognizing the hollow alternatives, and deciding that Jesus alone has the words of eternal life. The question is, what will you say?